In this video, we began a new book from the Nag Hammadi library. We are now on Codex II, book number 5, titled On the Origin of the World. We have two translations we can take from. We are going to be reading and commenting on the Barstone and Mayer translation, as it does provide us headers and is written in paragraph form, thereby making it easy for us to pick up where we left off from previous videos. Before we begin the read and commentary of this book, let's go to the free encyclopedia Wikipedia and read a little regarding this book called On the Origin of the World. It is a Gnostic work dealing with the creation and the end time. It was found among the texts in what is known as the Nag Hammadi library, in Codex II, and also appears in Codex XIII. It immediately follows the reality of the rulers, also known as the hypostasis of the archons, the video series we just completed. There are many parallels between these two texts. The manuscript does not have a title, but scholars have dubbed it On the Origin of the World because of what it describes. It is estimated to have been written sometime in the near end of the 3rd century. While the author is not mentioned, he or she seems to have been interested in expressing a Gnostic understanding of the world's conception. In particular, it rethinks the entire story of Genesis and positions Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, as the creator of the world, fulfilling the role of God in Genesis. Furthermore, the serpent in the Garden of Eden is depicted as a hero sent by Sophia, the figure of wisdom, to guide mankind towards enlightenment. It expresses one approach to the creation and end of the world. Other myths found within the Nag Hammadi collection have varying explanations and details. This one has a distinct perspective. It intertwines views from Judaism, Christianity, Hellenistic and Egyptian thought, and others in order to help explain its concept of Gnosticism. The cosmogony and anthropogony that follow upon the semi-philosophical beginning are in part oriented to Genesis 1 through 3. But beyond that, to concepts such as those known by Jubilees or the Enoch literature. In general, characteristically Jewish influences dominate. For example, angelology, demonology, eschatology, as well as etymologies. The Gnostic reinterpretation of the received material varies considerably. It extends from complete reevaluation in the case of the demiurge's presumption that he is the one and only God, and no other gods are before him, and what took place in Genesis 3, to relatively unbroken appropriation of Jewish ideas and motifs, such as the presentation of paradise or the Garden of Eden. The primordial history emphasizes the creation of the earthly man by the archons in connection with the doctrine of the primal man. On the Origin of the World is oriented toward universal eschatology. This is shown by the many allusions to the end, as well as by the broad presentation of the final events, with a massive appropriation of thoughts, terms, and motifs from apocalypticism, the final state brought about by the higher world, distinguishing the redemption of the Gnostics from the destruction of the creation together with its creator, this is the archon and the demiurge, and the flesh body, surpasses the primal condition, renders impossible a repetition of events such as these presented in On the Origin of the World, meaning, in other words, the process set forth by the Mother-Father monad is perfect by design and needs not be repeated. Okay, so with that backdrop, we can now begin the read and commentary of On the Origin of the World. And I'm taking this from the Gnostic Society Library, the Nag Hammadi Library, On the Origin of the World, translated by Willis Barstone and Marvin Mayer. First section titled Before the Beginning. Since everyone, the gods of the world and people, says that nothing existed prior to chaos, I shall demonstrate they are all mistaken, since they do not know the origin of chaos and its root. Here is the demonstration. This could be an early example of setting forth a philosophical argument for a god. It appears whoever is writing this may have had experience of many philosophical thoughts, which may argue that before everything was, there was chaos. This writer is suggesting, no, in fact, there was something prior to chaos, And I'm going to demonstrate in this writing why I say that is the case. And so he or she says, how agreeable it is to all people to say that chaos is darkness. Now this is emphasized with a exclamation mark, meaning, in other words, he or she is emphasizing that they want to point out specifically how they're going to redefine this understanding of what chaos really is. It isn't, in fact, darkness, which indicates evil or something bad. But he or she says, but actually chaos comes from a shadow. So when we think of a shadow, it's not as foreboding in terms of symbolage. Shadows are somewhere in between light and dark, and that has been called darkness. So this writer is attempting to make this understanding of what chaos is in a more definitive, accurate way by calling it not darkness, but instead coming from a shadow. The shadow comes from something existing from the beginning. This writer, of course, is moving from complete darkness toward shadow as a way to invite us toward the light. So it is obvious that something in the beginning existed before chaos came into being, and that chaos came after what was in the beginning. Again, arguing that chaos, which would be complete darkness in the minds of those gods and people of this writer's experience, would be illogical, according to this writer, as it would have no form. Forms are brought forth through shadow, or definition is brought forth not through darkness, but through shadow, as their light and dark play on one another to bring about definition. One way of thinking of it would be a blank sheet of paper that's completely black versus a piece of paper that may have some shadow in it, and you might be able to create an abstract artistic rendering in your mind of what those shadows may symbolize, represent for you. This is what this writer is using as their argument as to why this is a more logical way to understand chaos and where it derives from. So it is obvious that something in the beginning existed before chaos came into being, and that chaos came after what was in the beginning. So now let us consider the facts of the matter, and in particular what was in the beginning from which chaos came. And this way the truth will be clearly demonstrated. Interesting, this writer is arguing that chaos in fact derived from perhaps something more orderly. This is what's being implied here. So let's continue to read in the next section. Birth of Sophia and the forces of darkness. After the nature of the immortals were completed out of the infinite one, and the infinite one, of course, is God, or the monad, mother, father, and the immortal ones are the aeons. Then a likeness called Sophia flowed out of Pistis. Now, Pistis is one attribute of God. Remember, there are 5 attributes of God that are syzygistic pair, thus becoming, the pentad becoming a decad, a total of 5 pairs, so a total of 10 attributes of the Mother Father, one being truth and faith. Pistis is known as faith, and Sophia flows out of this understanding. Faith is the substance of things unseen and the promise of things yet to be. So when we think of the leading edge or the outer perimeter of the pleroma that is expanding, the emanation expanding into the shadow, we would see that it is only capable of expanding if it reaches for the faith that there is something more and the hope of what is to come. And of course I am hinting from Hebrews 11:1. King James Version states, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So this is essentially what wisdom seeks out. Wisdom is had not by it being given, but by knowledge being practiced through experience, and thus wisdom is gained. And this can only be had by something that's not already known. So the shadows provide an opportunity for hope and extension. This is what essentially is being said here. So it says, after the nature of the mortals were completed out of the infinite one, then a likeness called Sophia flowed out of faith, or pistis. Sophia meaning wisdom. So wisdom comes out of the understanding that one has hope for that substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The evidence can be had anecdotally. It can be had through of intuitive feeling that you get, movement within you, or repose of rest, where you find your comfort and you find your inspiration. That in and of itself is derived from something. This is the substance that's being referred to, the motion and the repose that's mentioned in Gospel according to Thomas. And so wisdom flows out of faith. Without faith, one would have no desire to continue to live or believe. that there is something beyond. So faith allows for one to step out. I'm reminded of that movie. I'm not sure if it's the Temple of Doom or but it's one of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies where Indiana Jones has to step out into the open valley where there's nothing below him, thousands of feet, in order for the bridge to materialize. And this is what he does. He closes his eyes, of course, and he steps forward. And as he puts his feet forward into the canyon below, the bridge appears. This is what you are seeing being described here. How wisdom is flowing out of faith with the wish that something should come into being like the light that first existed. So this extension into the shadow from the pleroma, this is the action known as emanating or emanation that is from the monad that brings all things into process. Immediately her wish appeared as a heavenly likeness. So this is very significant because it points out that Sophia, because she is the aeon of faith and wisdom, is able to utilize this wisdom and faith in order to bring about things instantly. As it says, immediately her wish appeared. When we are able to recognize our hope within, whatever that thing or that goal or inspiration that drives us or moves us or brings us to peace, these are moments of clarity, pure clarity that we want to reflect on and marinate ourselves in, because they tell us about the pure essence of who we are and what our mission is here in this incarnation. It also then sets forth that understanding of Sophia to live life through wisdom and faith. When we are able to tap into that hope within, it becomes substantial, and we begin to see that life is worth living, and we see a glimmer of something to be sought after. So this is why the wish that she set forth became immediately, and it was a heavenly likeness with an incomprehensible greatness. This Sophia is within you, just as the Christ is within you. This potential for wisdom is set forth when you have the faith to live your life seeking out a wise way of living. But in order for you to understand that, you must first set the match, which would be, of course, gnosis. Understanding there is a purpose, and the purpose is divine and perfect, and it's within you as intended from the beginning. And everything you've been told that what is within you is evil and bad and corrupt is in fact the very opposite. That's the Gnostic moment, when you realize that there's something more intrinsically valuable within you than everything that's outside of you. The illusion that is called the matrix of the Kanoma. That's the moment that is great, that's being referred to. Here, immediately her wish appeared as a heavenly likeness with an incomprehensible greatness. This came between the immortals, the aeons, and those who came into being after them. And so this created a separation. We're going to see why it created a separation, like what is above. It was a veil separating people from the things above. This creates definition and individuation. This is not something that is dark or evil. This is what this writer is trying to clarify to us, but rather is as a shadow. And the shadow is a movement, you see, it's a movement. Darkness is simply still, and you can't see if there's any movement if it's complete pitch dark. But with shadow, you can see movement, and this is the beginning of process and life that is taking shape through wisdom and faith. Now, the eternal realm of truth has no shadow within it, because the immeasurable light is everywhere within it. In other words, there's complete knowledge and fullness in the pleroma, and thereby there can be no shadow within it. It is complete. Outside of it, however, is a shadow, and it was called darkness. From it appeared a power over the darkness. This is where power comes into play. Power comes about when you have opposites. When you have the shadow is where the power resides, between the dark realm and the light realm. This is the polar opposites, when you have negative and positive. To the degree in which it's positive and negative, and they come together or are being forced together, is to the degree you're going to create enormous amounts of friction and power. And the powers that came into being afterward called the shadow the limitless chaos. The reason it's limitless is because the light that is emanating from the mother monad, mother father, is infinite. Infinite light. Not infinite power, but infinite light, which is the extinguishing of the opposites. This is what light does. It does not destroy the darkness, but rather it takes it in and forms a new part of God. And so it's not destructive, but rather it is creative. And the powers that came into being afterward call the shadow the limitless chaos. So this is why it is limitless. From it every kind of deity was brought forth, one after another, along with the whole place. So everything was brought about in this realm, below the pleroma, from that action of the emanation through Sophia into this thing called chaos. Consequently, the shadow too is subsequent to what was in the beginning. And so the shadow is also something that follows progressively after the light or the emanation. The shadow appeared in the abyss, which is derived from pistis. And this abyss comes about because one must first have faith that there is something beyond. If one does not believe there's something beyond, then in one's mind there is merely a wall, and nothing is beyond the wall. And so there is no potential beyond that wall that one has in one's mind. A shadow appeared in the abyss, and it's derived from pistis, meaning faith, who we have mentioned. The shadow perceived that there was one stronger than it, and it was jealous. This is a natural consequence. The jealousy comes about because it recognizes that something is perhaps more than it. This jealousy is the beginning of envy and ultimately death and ultimately our capacity for free will. It was jealous, and when it became self-impregnated, it immediately bore envy. Since that day, the principle of envy has appeared in all the aeons and their worlds, and they then became archons, meaning an archway of the ancients that would assist humanity from the kenoma back into the fullness. But one must first be emptied of the fullness in order that one may bring one's individual, unique self, their name, as an addition to the continuation of the emanation of fullness. So the God is forever expanding into infinity. But every envy was found to be an aborted fetus. This envy is merely a utility, you see, but ultimately it leads to a type of husk or flesh body that will die. And it is only temporarily alive. When we talk about an aborted fetus, the image is quite horrific, really. You can think of a fetus that's being aborted. It may stay alive a little while, but then it will die, and it will be as wastrel on the ground. And this is what the aborted fetus is representing. And it will be surrounded by a watery substance, and that would be the amniotic sac that's being released from the womb. This is what this realm is from the womb of Sophia. But within it also, it carries the potential for the continuation of the emanation through each one of us, which is the hope of glory, the Christ within, the wisdom within. It became like the shadows in a great watery substance. Then the bitter wrath that came into being from the shadow was cast into a region of chaos. Since that day a watery substance has appeared. What was enclosed in the shadow flowed forth, appearing in chaos. Just as all the useless afterbirth of one who bears a little child falls, likewise the matter that came into being from the shadow was cast aside. Matter did not come out of chaos, but it was in chaos, existing in a part of it. In other words, the design was already programmed into the chaos. Matter, matrix, it's all the same. Mathematics, magicianship. This is the understanding of the matrix. When you think about mathematics, it comes from the same word. It's to understand the matrix. It's to understand matter. Through measuring it, mother, Maya, the illusion, all of these stem from that understanding of the way we form or articulate the sound ma, from inward outward, ma. Matter didn't come out of chaos, but it was already in chaos, existing in a part of it. So it was already in the design, you see. So we're going to read one more section. Yaldabaoth establishes his rule. Now after these things happen, Pistis came and appeared over the matter of chaos, so faith arrives into the chaos, which was cast off like an aborted fetus, since there was no spirit in it. So in other words, this aborted fetus could have been left behind, but rather faith, which is driven by compassion and hope, come to visit this aborted fetus. For all of that is a boundless darkness and water of unfathomable depth. And when Pistis saw what came into being from her deficiency, she was disturbed. So it moved her to see this aborted fetus. She could have abandoned that aborted fetus, but she chose to redeem it. And the disturbance appeared as something frightful, and it fled to her in the chaos. She turned to it and breathed into its face in the abyss. She breathed her wisdom into it, which is beneath all of the heavens. So it was beneath her to do this, but yet she still did it. So she was moved out of love. See, as I always say, wisdom is knowledge and love combined. Because when we understand wisdom, when we have wisdom, we understand the deepest knowledge one can hold is the understanding of love and its ability to bring all things forth and to heal all things. Now, when Pistis Sophia wanted to cause the thing that had no spirit to be formed into a likeness and rule over matter and over all its powers, she wanted that this intelligence that was within the chaos to become aware enough that it would be able to bring forth a likeness of what she initially intended, which was to experience and embrace the fullness of God, which was an anomaly in thinking because the infinity of the true Mother Father cannot be embraced. It can only be partially embraced through a process, a concrete process, a slowing down of frequency, because otherwise, if you sped it up, it would destroy everything. This is the potency of the emanation. And so it says, now when Pistis Sophia wanted to cause the thing that had no spirit to be formed into a likeness, and rule over matter and over all its powers, a ruler first appeared out of the waters, lion-like in appearance. Lion-like meaning prideful, egotistical, dramatic, flaring like the sun, but in the self-same time, not only dramatic in wanting to hoard the spotlight, but also in wanting to be generative and giving of its light, thereby being a god of both good and evil. Androgynous, meaning both. And that androgynistic characteristic would allow it to be creative, because it could take from those two parts of itself. With great authority within himself, but ignorant of whence he came into being. He must remain ignorant for a purpose. Remember, Sophia wants to embrace the infinite. Before everything was, the infinite was in silence and repose. Thereby it was utterly alone, and it only knew of itself. And so here, the demiurge must know only of itself, as being the prime ruler, or the prime cause of all things, however inaccurate this understanding is by the demiurge. When Pistis Sophia saw him moving in the depth of the waters, she said to him, "Youth, pass over here." In other words, naivety. She's saying that Yaldabaoth, you are naive. Come over here, meaning come toward wisdom. Come towards faith. This is an invitation to ascend, which is interpreted as Yaldabaoth. So this is what you must ultimately understand. This is what this word means. It means the naive one that through its ignorance allows for a process of ascension. Not transcendence, but ascension. So she's saying, youth, pass over here, meaning naive one, ascend toward wisdom, toward me. Since that day, the first principle of the word that referred to the gods and angels and people have appeared. And that first word is ascension, through naivety, or ignorance, or emptiness. And the gods and the angels and people constitute that which came into being by means of the word. Moreover, the ruler Yaldabaoth is ignorant of the power of Pistis. He is ignorant of the power of faith. It is only that Sophia blew the faith, or breathed the faith, into that lifeless abortive fetus that was able to animate Yaldabaoth to bring about creation and to expand into the shadows. He's the god of chaos. But within that chaos exists the intelligence that brings about matter. He did not face her, but he saw in the water the likeness that spoke with him. And from that voice, he called himself Yaldabaoth. And remember that it was that reflection that he modeled this world from. But yet it was imperfect modeling, because the reflection was through the light waters. He could only make it out in a very hazy way, type of shadow. And from that voice he called himself Yaldabaoth. But the perfect ones called him Ariael, because he was like a lion. And after he came to possess authority over matter, Pistis Sophia withdrew up to her light. Now she had finished what she intended to do. She invested in him authority to oversee matter, not oversee chaos. Though he's the god of chaos, it is matter that ultimately he will bring about, whether he knows this or not. He is a utility toward the matrix being brought about. So this word Ariel, we're going to look at this here before we close out in this video. We also have heard this in canonical texts, one being Isaiah 29. Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices. Here Ariel is referring to the city of Jerusalem. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. And it goes on to say in verse 7, and the multitude of all the nations that fight against Jerusalem, even all that fight against her and her munition, and that distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. And the reason here is because he is Jerusalem, the Jewish, and all that follow after the Jewish, whether it be Christians or Islam that rule the world. Their God is Yaldabaoth, and he's the God of this world. So he invests them with power to bring about the order, the matrix. This design is set forth so that everyone can find their individuation and to find their true self. But the only way the individuation can be brought about is by first allowing you to be in a realm where you're emptied, and then you can fill yourself up in your own way. No one is going to dictate that for you. Only you will do that. And you're going to know it through repose and motion, what inspires you and what brings you comfort and rest. Those are the moments that you want to reflect on and meditate on. And when you find those moments, then you know you're following after your truth, and you will be able to find that unique Christ within, the hope of glory. But in order to do that, you must understand this design and have faith in it. So if you don't have faith in it, then you're not going to have the will to continue on this mission. And this will comes about through gnosis, as we talked about many, many times, a true understanding of our true origins, not what you've been told by the churches that dominate this planet and purposely mislead you. Now, whether they know that or not, most of them probably don't. Most of the preachers, pastors don't know that, but they are ruled on high from the great mountain of Zion, as it talks about in verse number 8. It shall even be as when a hungry man dreameth, and behold, he eateth. It's talking about everyone that isn't from Jerusalem or under the Judean umbrella, but he awaketh and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreameth. He's talking about the Lord of hosts is talking to, or the demiurge is talking to Isaiah here, who's writing this in a vision. And behold, he drinketh, but he awaketh, and behold, he is faint, and his soul hath appetite. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. So this is the understanding. So what do we get from these last two sections, essentially, is that Yaldabaoth is the god of the material realm, known as the matrix, the Kanoma, but purposely set forth by Sophia, ordained to have possession of authority over matter. And he sets up over the kingdom of this world. He is the God of this world, you see, God of the air and fire. And he sets forth an organization and a design that's observable and measurable. And people who become masters wear the black cloth in his name, planet Saturn, and measure it out to be truth, whether it be through math or mastership. The matrix all stems from that word, matter. Matrix, mathematics, magicianship, magic, all of those words stem from matter. They all come from that same root understanding, you see. And so the God of this world rules over matter. And he gives you the understanding of what truth is through that lens. And that's purposely set up. It is not darkness, but rather it is shadow. Now, he's the God of chaos, but it provides the light that shines into the darkness, brings about a shadow, and that shadow brings forth movement and repose, and that allows each one of us to find our unique selves through that process. All right, with that, we're going to pick up in the next video under the section titled Yaldabaoth Creates Heaven and Earth and Bears 3 Sons. All right, thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon. Bye.